Hi everyone, good evening. This is Dr. Nishana Jumuddin, Senior Faculty Economy at Ecom IAS Academy. In today's session, we'll have a quick look into the 2024 PYQs based on the subject Indian Economy. In this particular session, we'll have a quick look into what are the most important topics that was asked for the previous year examination, and we'll be having a 360-degree coverage explanation of the same. Along with that, what are the problem areas that you can expect for the upcoming 2025 examination will also be discussed. So now, as we all know, over the years, based on the UPSC CSE exam pattern, both prelims and mains, the weightage of Indian economy as a subject is on the rise. If you see for the prelims examination, there are years where 20 plus questions have come from Indian economy. And if you see in 2024, more than 10 questions came. Approximately 13 questions from this particular subject was asked in the examination. So now, every year when you study this particular subject, you should keep in mind it holds a greater weightage and your preparation should be in such a way. And as far as economy is concerned, it is not just a static preparation. You need to follow static plus interlinking them with the trending current affairs method. Why? Because most of the questions in your PYQs have shown a trend where the questions are connected with the recent or trending current affairs. So now let's quickly have a look into the very first question from last year's paper. With reference to Indian economy, collateral borrowing and lending obligations are the instruments of what? Option A is bond market, we have forex market, then C, money market, and D, we have stock market. And we know that the answer is money market. So what are CBLOs basically? So collateral borrowing and lending obligations, they are short-term money market instruments. Money market itself is a short-term instruments, right? So now CBLOs comes under that. And now using this CBLO, what do? They can borrow and lend money using a collateral. So that's how the transaction happens via collateral borrowing and lending agreement. This particular instrument has been there since 2003. It was introduced by your CCLI, that is the Clearing Corporation of India Limited. So it's CCIL, not LI, CCIL, that is Clearing Corporation of India Limited. And today if you see this particular money market instrument called as CBLO, it has been discontinued. Since November 2018, they have discontinued this and has been replaced with a new instrument called as TREPS. That is your tri-party repo. And now, when this particular CBLOs were there, the basic reason why we use this particular financial market instrument is basically to manage liquidity or let's say money supply, and also for short-term funding requirements. And now, these particular CBLOs, they are discounted instruments. And how are they available? They are available in electronic book entry form. Since these are short-term money market instruments, what about the maturity? They don't mature in 6 months or 1 year. Rather, the maturity period for using this particular CBLOs is 1 to 19 days. That is the maturity period of CBLO. So this is what you should know with regard to what? Your collateral borrowing and lending obligation. I told you it has been replaced with TREPS, that is tri-party repo. So that is again another hit list topic for your upcoming examination. So what is TREPS basically? Using the short-term financial market instrument, you can borrow and lend money secured by government assets. Same thing, giving collateral and borrowing. A revised version of CBLO is your TREPS. Now, having said that, moving on to the next question, that is your total fertility rate, how it is defined. So now the answer is option number D, as you see here. Why? We all know that total fertility rate is not associated with the couples as it is given in option number 2, or it is not related with your birth rate or death rate, or it is not related with the number of children born per 1,000 people. Rather, it talks about the fertility condition of a woman. That is total fertility rate. It refers to what? The average number of children or the total children born or likely to be born to a woman in an entire lifetime. And now, this entire lifetime is if she were subjected to the prevailing rate of age-specific fertility rate. That is during her fertility time. For example, 15 to 49 years. During that period of time, how much or how many children she can bear or produce. If you see, recently, as per the data, the TFR rate has been on the decline. In 1950s, the total fertility rate was 6 for one woman. Matlab, she could have 6 children in an entire lifetime. But now, it has come down to 2. The TFR stands at 2. Now, in this particular topic, one of the related topic which you can expect for the upcoming examination is replacement level fertility. It is RLF. That is the total fertility rate of about 2.1 children is called as replacement level fertility. For example, it is said that if the total fertility rate is below 2.1, that means that a woman will not be able to even produce the next generation as it is required, which means that the total fertility rate lower than 2.1, which is called as the replacement level fertility, it indicates a generation is not producing enough children to replace itself, eventually leading to what? An reduction in your population. So that is another important point which you need to understand with regard to TFR. There are multiple reasons why total fertility rate has been on the decline. One is women empowerment. Second is people are getting more awareness regarding family planning programs and things like that. Apart from that, the lifestyle. The changing lifestyle has been a major reasons for the decline in this fertility. And now it is said that if this decline keep on and on continuing for some period of time, then by 2050, the total fertility rate in our country, India, it will become 1.29. I'm talking about 2050, okay? And by 2100, the TFR will become 1.04. So these are the related current affairs of this particular topic. You can make a note of them. Now, moving on to the next question. Consider the following statement. The keyword is non-banking financial company. The first statement tells that they can access what? The LAF, Liquidity Adjustment Facility window of the RBI. The second one tells that in India, foreign institutional investors can hold GSEC, that's government security. And third, in India, stock exchange can offer separate trading platforms for debts. Now, before explaining this particular question, let me quickly teach you students a trick or a method or a shortcut of solving the MCQs. This is exclusively introduced by me. It is called as the KEC technique for solving the UPSC prelims examination. Now, whenever a question is given to you, using the keyword elimination comparison technique called as KEC, start identifying what is the main keyword in the question. So we have a tendency of understanding that whatever is given in the headline or in the top of the question is your keyword. Now, before that, you need to understand which of the following statements are correct or incorrect. That is called as primary keyword, because many a times UPSC CSE aspirants tend to make this silly and careless mistakes, right? Sometimes UPSC can ask you which of the statements are correct, incorrect or not correct. Because you are in the habit of identifying correct statements, you tend to forget it. So to avoid silly and careless mistakes, Just stress on that point. Which of the statements are correct or incorrect? Identify that first. Then go to the secondary keyword of the question. So here it is generic. Consider the following statements, and you have not one particular keyword. Rather, one statement talks about LAF, another about FII, another about stock exchange. So this has again multiple keywords. Normally, for example, consider the following statements about NBFC. They give you like that. But over here, you can see 3 different keywords coming. Now, using the comparison technique, you have to compare each of these statements. Since it is not having a linkage, you have to individually analyze them. And then whichever option is incorrect, when you eliminate that option out of the given code, you'll be able to easily take it off. So you will get the answer which is more or less similar, or let's say 99% is similar to what you want. Now, having said that, the first statement, in India, NBFCs can access. So we all know that in our country, India, NBFCs, they could not access or they cannot access what? The LAF, Liquidity Adjustment Facility. So basically LAF, it is one of the quantitative instruments of monetary policy. It is called as repurchase options or agreement. Using this, the commercial banks can borrow money from RBI. There are 3 categories of LAF. One is repo rate, another is reverse repo rate, and the third one is MSF, marginal standing facility. So now LAF basically consists of only these 3, and now these are exclusive for the scheduled commercial banks, not for the non-banking financial companies or NBFCs. So that is why the first statement is incorrect. Having understood that the first one is incorrect, using the KZ technique, your elimination technique, what will you do? You will see the options wherever there is 1, and you'll start eliminating or removing those options. Let's have a look here. Option A and C is fatafat eliminated. Why? Because you have the presence of 1 there. Though you have 2 and 3 in the options also, we know that 1 makes that particular statement incorrect. Yes? So out of B and D, make a choice. Either 3 or 2 and 3. Now, back to the second question. It talks about foreign institutional investors. We all know that yes, in our country, India, the FIIs can hold G6, no doubt about it. Why? Because this particular foreign institutional investors, who are they basically? They are people who are allowed to invest where in the government in the government securities or G-Sec of our country. But it has certain limitations and regulations as well. And now this regulation is being done by the Central Bank of our country, India, RBI, along with the SEBI, that is Security Exchange Board of India. So now, having said that, the third statement, that is your stock exchange, they can offer separate trading platforms for debt. Now, this particular statement is also correct. Why? Because in India, talking about the stock exchange, yes, we can and we do provide what? A trading platform. That too, a separate trading platform for all the debt instruments, such as your bonds, which is a debt instrument, your debentures, etc. And now, if you see, we have BSE and NSE. What are they? Yeah, very good. Bombay Stock Exchange and National Stock Exchange. And these dedicated segments are used for what? For trading such kind of debt securities. Now, having said that, this particular topic again is very important. For the coming 2025 examination also, you can get questions based on the SEBI or let's say based on the related topics from your primary as well as secondary markets. Now, another important point which I want to tell you regarding this FII, that is foreign institutional investors. So it is said that in India they can hold G6, right? But there is a limit. It's not like they can hold as much as they want. If you see, as for the recent current affairs, the government of India, what did they do? They've increased the limit. The current limit for what? The FII in your G-Sec. That is previously it was $5 billion. But currently it has become US dollar 10 billion. You can see this, the cap is that, the limit is that. Similarly, the limits for, this is not only for government, okay. The foreign institutional investors, they can invest in GSEC, government securities, as well as in corporate bonds. Or let's say they can invest where? In the securities with a residential maturity of certain more than 5 years. And now, when they invest in corporate bonds, the bonds issued by company, there also limit has been increased. Previously it was 5 billion. Now it has become 20 billion. So for GSEC, the limit has increased to 10 billion from 5 billion. And for corporate bonds, it has increased from what, children? Very good, to 20 billion. And now, there is a condition as well. This new increment, okay, which has been given to the foreign institutional investors, says that if they want to invest in a corporate bond with a maturity of, let's say, 5 years, then that has to be done for certain important or critical sector. Like what? Like the infrastructure sector. That is also another important point to be noted. And for the coming year, your FDI, your FII, even FPI, foreign portfolio investment, all these things are related hit list topic. And from the FDI, there is something called as automatic route and government route. So these are certain areas which you need to focus for the upcoming examination as well. Okay. Now, the next one. In India, which of the following can trade in what? Corporate bonds and government securities. 1. Insurance company. 2. Pension funds. And 3. Retail investors. Now, this is a very, very simple question. Why? Because we know that corporate bonds and G6, they can trade in all the three. But normally when you see this question, this pension funds make you a little skeptical because you think that corporate bonds and G6 cannot trade in pension fund. But if you see as far as the current affairs is concerned, it is possible. So the answer becomes D. So now, what is a GSEC basically? Government security. They are what? A tradable instrument. They are a tradable instrument. Who issues a government security? Is it only the central government? No. Government security is a tradable instrument that has been issued by the central as well as the state government. Okay. And now, when we talk about this trade in corporate bonds and GSEC, all of these, your insurance company, pension funds and retail segments or investors can also invest in it. You can see here, for example, in the context of insurance company, not only the government sec or government security, these insurance companies can also invest in both corporate and government security. And this is a part of their investment portfolio. Similarly, with regard to pension funds also, along with government securities, they are capable or they can invest where? In the corporate bonds as well. And now, this is being done basically to manage their liability. What liability? Long-term liability. That is the point here. So automatically what happens when they're able to manage or meet their long-term liability, they'll be able to generate what? Adequate returns for their beneficiaries. That is why it has been permitted. And the third one, that is retail investors. Now, corporate as well as government security. Retail investors can invest. No doubt about it. But if you want, for example, to invest in a retail, in a government security by a retail investor means, for that, they have to use this platform called as RDS. That is Retail Direct Scheme. This is for government securities. Okay. Whereas, if a retail investor wants to invest, let's say for example in a corporate bond, then they can do that either through mutual funds or they can do through what? Your direct purchase, either through primary or secondary market. So this is how basically they do what, my children? They do the investments. Now, the next question. Consider the following. ETF, motor vehicles, currency swap. Again, a question from your financial markets or instruments. And it is as follows. Which of the above is considered as a financial instrument? All the above or should we eliminate? The moment you see this question, we all know that motor vehicle cannot be a part of what? Financial instrument. So automatically what happens? Applying the KEZ technique, keyword elimination comparison, we will eliminate what? Option number 2. Automatically all the options having 2 will be fatafat eliminated. So what happens? Option B, Option C is eliminated. Out of A and D, make a choice. Either only 1 or 1 and 3. From this you came to know that your first option is 101% correct. Sometimes if you never knew that exchange traded funds are a financial instrument, this KZ technique made you understand that it is a short option, because both A and D has that. So your focus should now be on the third one, that is currency swap. It's an exchange agreement again. And the answer is what? Option D. Both 1 and 3 are correct statements. So basically, what is a financial instruments? So financial instruments are nothing but they refer to any assets that can be exchanged or traded, right? By whom? By the investors. And now this financial instrument, it can consist of both tangible and non-tangible assets, they say. See, tangible means what you can see. Even motor vehicle is also what? A tangible asset, right? But why it is not included? Because they don't form a part of the financial markets, right? And now, though they are tangible, assets, what you can see, feel or touch also, these motor vehicles, they don't form a part of your financial instruments. So that is the reason we had to eliminate it. Talking about your ETF, that is exchange traded fund. What are they? Let's have a quick look into what is, ETF. So basically, exchange traded funds, okay, in simple terms, they are investments. What investments? They are investment funds that are traded on the stock exchange. It's much like an individual stock. Again, it has been regulated by what? SEBI, Security Exchange Board of India. Now, why you need an exchange traded funds? So now, this exchange traded funds, they are designed to track the performance of a particular index or a commodity, currency, or let's say a mix of asset classes. And it is very easy for the investors to use this ETF, that is exchange traded fund, because ETFs actually give what? This exchange traded fund gives a lot of offers to investors. So in a way, these investors, if they're trading via ETF, what happens, my children? It enables them to diversify their portfolios. Okay. Now, there is no need for them to buy individual securities. Without that itself, they can do this. So that is the benefit or advantage of having what? Exchange traded funds. And if you see, one of the recent current affairs, 2024 current affairs, in the month of June, this particular current affairs was there. That is Hong Kong. Hong Kong has launched its, first, or let's say Asia's first Bitcoin, spot Bitcoin. There is something called as spot Bitcoin. Take care. So now Hong Kong has launched Asia's first spot Bitcoin, and Ether, E-T-H-E-R, Ether ETF, that is exchange traded fund, in a step forward of becoming a virtual assessment hub of the region. And we all know Bitcoin is connected to cryptocurrency. And now this is something called as spot Bitcoin. What is spot Bitcoin? Spot means immediate, right? So spot Bitcoin refers to the immediate purchase or sale of Bitcoin. The very first cryptocurrency is Bitcoin. So an advanced version of that is spot Bitcoin. So that, as well as your Ether exchange traded fund, was launched by Hong Kong. So it was actually there in your current affairs as well. So you can just make a note of these topics as well. Okay, you can just note it down. And how does this exchange traded fund be used by Hong Kong? If you see, the exchange traded fund, they can be traded in both Hong Kong dollars and US dollars, and also in the Chinese yuan. You understand? So that is how this has been done. So because of that particular current affairs, this topic is a little more important for the upcoming year as well. Now, what is currency swap? Swap means what? Exchange. So basically, a currency swap is also what? It is a financial derivative contract. So there will be two parties. Two parties means two countries. They will do what? The exchange of the amount. So that's basically called as a currency swap in simple term. Is it clear? So currency swap, there is something called as currency swap agreement. It's nothing but a contract between two parties. Two parties here means what? Two countries. Let's say, for example, a currency swap agreement between India and US. between India and Japan. You understand? Now, what do? This using the currency swap agreements, these two countries, okay, they will exchange currencies at a particular, or let's say at a predetermined means already fixed rates, at a predetermined rates and conditions. And the reason why you have such kind of currency swap, one is to avoid the balance of payment crisis. Another one is to obtain foreign currency loans at a better interest rate, not too high, not too less, but quite feasible for the countries. And also to meet the short-term foreign exchange liquidity needs. So basically for this we use the currency swap agreement. So you can just go through that. If you see a country India, we have signed a lot of currency swap agreements with other countries. And if you see even Sri Lanka, Maldives, all these countries also, India has signed such kind of currency swap agreement. Is it clear? So typically, see, for example, one party, there are two countries, right? One party is borrowing in its domestic currency and lends what? In the another currency, while the other party does the opposite. This is how your currency swap agreement works. So your principal as well as the interest payments on a loan which denominated in one particular country's currency will be exchanged. That's called as currency swap in simple terms. Is it clear, all of you? This is a very, very important hit list topic, not only for this year, even for the upcoming year as well. So that is why I gave you few examples. Now here we have a very interesting question. Indeed, a very simple question I will tell you. What is it? With reference to sectors of economy, consider the following. So now this is a question which is quite interesting, where they are not asking you to identify the right pair. Rather, what is the question? How many of the pair given is correctly matched? The question is not which of the following pair. If it is which of the following pair means okay, for option 2 and option 3 will be right. 4 will be right. For example, you will say like 1 and 3, 1 and 4, or 1, 2, 3. Over here, the UPSC has asked you to identify out of all these options, how many of them are right. They are not specifically asking you, is it option 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a new pattern of question that has been seen since 2023 in the UPSC examination pattern. Take care. Now what is the answer? We all know the answer is option number B. Only 2 pairs are correct, right? What is the question? Sectors of Indian economy. A very basic question. Your NCERT, your class 10 chapter 2 of Indian economy, NCERT it is. 3 sectors of economy. What are they? Primary, secondary, tertiary. What is primary? Primary consists of the agriculture and the related, or let's say the allied activities like farming, forestry, fishing, mining, then very good, quarrying, etc., etc. Even mineral, or let's say even energy extraction is also coming under what? Primary sector. Because energy is basically, people think it is a secondary or industrial sector ka activity, but extraction of energy comes under primary sector, whereas transformation of energy comes under secondary sector. For example, solar energy. You keep all the solar roof panels and all, right? You extract energy from the sun. That is primary sector activity. Once you transform or process that energy to electricity, it is a secondary sector activity. Why I said this particular point is, sometimes in the 2025 examination, out of the following activities, identify which of them comes under primary sector. In that, they can give an option called as energy extraction. So seeing energy, people will think what? It is secondary sector. But it's not that the case. Is it clear? Energy extraction is primary, energy transformation or processing is secondary sector. Now, having said that, the next is manufacturing sector. So now, manufacturing sector means what? Again, your industrial sector. Activities like your constructions, your converting raw materials into finished products, all these comes under what? The industrial or the secondary or the manufacturing sector. Now, the third one is what? Tertiary sector. Now, this particular tertiary sector or service sector means all the activities that support both primary and secondary sector comes under tertiary sector. Your banking, transport, communication, the service of a doctor, lawyer, teacher, etc. All these are what? Examples of tertiary sector. Now, out of all these three sectors, this particular tertiary sector holds a lot of importance. Because even today, if you see, more than 50% of contribution towards a country's GDP comes from tertiary sector. Approximately 53% as per recent 2024 data. Why? Because since 1990, we had the introduction of new economic reforms or policies called as LPG, liberalization, privatization, globalization. During that time, what happened? Too many investments started coming into our country, India. And major focus was on the tertiary sector, I would say. And if you see, the reason why the GDP is high from tertiary sector for our country is because of too much of investments into two subsectors that comes under service sector. One is IT, information technology, and another is software. Now, having said this, you can use these points for the mains examination also. Now, having said that in this particular question, storage of agriculture produce, of course, it is primary sector. Dairy farm, primary, correct. Mineral exploration, it is again primary sector. How can it be tertiary? Definitely no. So, it is incorrect. And weaving cloth, we know that weaving cloth is what? Secondary sector. So, in this particular question, only pair 1 and pair 4 is correct, whereas 2 and 3 are incorrect. Is it clear? Now, cloth again, if, for example, if it is the raw material of a cotton or something, then it is primary. But dyeing and weaving process starts when? In the secondary sector. So, that is where weaving cloth comes under secondary or industrial sector. Now, it's a very basic concept, but you see UPSC is very smart in testing how the aspirants are able to answer that. And that too, they give very simple example, but they have twisted or let's say tried to test your brains by using a trick of asking what? How many pairs are correct? So UPSC is not about children, difficult questions. As far as economy is concerned, it's a very simple subject. If you understand it in the right manner, in the proper manner, with interlinking of current affairs, then economy will be in your fingertips. Trust me. And that's what I keep doing for more than a decade, teaching and training students to make sure that economy is simplified. Anyways, having said that, the next one, that is consider the following materials: agriculture residues, then corn residue, grain, wastewater, treatment sludges, and finally we have wood mill waste. Now the question is, out of these options, which of the following can be used as what? Can be used as feedstock for providing what? Sustainable aviation fuel. So the keyword is SAF, that is sustainable or long-term aviation fuel. Now in this particular question, the answer is all the above. Is it so? No, yes, it's all the above. 1, 2, 3, 4 out of all the options. Which means that all of these materials are used as what? The feedstock for producing your sustainable aviation fuel. Now, for that you should know what is SAF in simple terms. So basically this SAF, it is actually a kind of alternative or let's say a substitute fuel, I would say, which is produced from what? Non-petroleum feedstocks. So now this is basically to make sure that there are lower or very less emissions in air travel. Because pollution is too much, right? So basically to lower the emissions in air travels only, this particular sustainable aviation fuel. Aviation means what? Your air again, with regard to your flights and all, right? So this particular sustainable aviation fuel was brought in. Now what do they do is that they will start blending or mixing what? The conventional or the traditional jet fuels with certain ratios. For example, 10 and 50%. depending on whatever feedstock and the production techniques you are using, and then they will convert it into what? A sustainable aviation fuel. And if you see, as far as the International Civil Organization, Civil Aviation Organization report is concerned, today, today, more than 3 lakh, approximately how much? 3,60,000 commercial flights, they have used the sustainable aviation fuel in more than 40 plus airports, approximately 46 airports I will say, especially in US and Europe and all. So very soon India will also start using all this because it is long term and sustainable, right? And now if you see agricultural residues, as per the option was correct. Let's quickly see what all materials can be converted to the sustainable aviation fuel from agriculture residue or waste. Okay. Now, your husk, straw and stalks, all these things, what do they do? These are residues or waste of agriculture. You can start converting or processing them into biofuels. So what happens? Automatically, it also consists of your sustainable aviation fuels when you convert them. And again, they use lot of conversion technologies for the same. Even the waste from corn grain, that is also used to make a SAF. How they basically ferment it so that they can produce something called as ethanol. Again, this ethanol they'll further process it to the sustainable aviation fuel. And basically this particular thing will be a common feedstock in the biofuel production, I would say. Then wastewater treatment sludge. Again, all the organic matter from your wastewater, what they will do? They'll slowly and gradually convert them. So that is how basically they convert your wastewater. And finally, wood mill waste. See, you have so many byproducts of the woods, right? And now there is something called as sawdust. You know what is sawdust? When you keep rubbing the wood, you get a dust out of it, right? That's called as sawdust. The wood sawdust, the wood chips, all these are what? The waste of wood mill. Now, why to throw it away? Rather, using the new technology, they will convert them into what? The biofuels. So now, it is making them a very suitable feedstock for the production of sustainable aviation fuel. So this is how all these products are being utilized to the SAF. Now the next question. Which of the following words or phrases is most appropriately used to denote an interoperable network of 3D virtual that can be accessed simultaneously, means same time, okay, by millions of users who can exert property rights over virtual item? So this is a very interesting question, and this particular question was asked from the current affairs perspective. And if you see the options also, cryptography, your cryptocurrency, your bitcoins, from that particular keyword, it is quite popular. And then your big data as well as your virtual metrics, all these are also quite popular. And now meta, of course we all know metaverse. Your meta is there even in your WhatsApp these days, right? Any answers you will be getting searching in meta. Similarly, metaverse is also what? A kind of interoperable network of 3D virtuals, I will say. So now the question is, out of these, what is the answer? See, all of these can be used in different perspectives. But what is the question? Out of these, the most appropriate one, which means the one that can be ranked number 1 out of all these, it goes to option number C, that is metaverse. So basically, what is metaverse? Quick, you don't look at the board and tell me, ma'am, this is metaverse, in a very simplified way. See, basically, metaverse is what? It is an extension of a real world, I would say. An extension of a real world into the online or digital world or digital realm. They were providing an immersive multi-user experience for anyone who is accessing it around the world or globe. So basically, metaverse refers to a virtual universe. Virtual means what? An online universe. Just like a real world, you can experience that. So it is a virtual universe where people can start interacting with each other and also digital or online objects in a shared online space. This is called as metaverse in the most simplified manner. It is called as immersive. The UPSC keywords are, it is basically immersive, and it is also, 3-dimensional virtual world. So using this metaverse, what people does, my children, so basically they will interact, in real time. But the only point here is, see, you will not be meeting people or interacting in person. But using this metaverse, using this online or the digital space, people can interact with each other in real time across multiple digital or online platforms. So thereby, what are they doing? They're combining it with the physical world. Isn't it interesting? Technologies have developed over the time. So many things, right? Now you don't think of doing a class in metaverse, take care. Slowly and gradually everything will come to that also. That is technology, my students. Anyways, the next one. Again, a very interesting questions from your banking. With reference to the rules imposed by Reserve Bank of India while treating foreign banks, consider the following statement. So now when you study your banking, the history of banking, you study scheduled bank, scheduled commercial bank, non-scheduled commercial bank. In scheduled commercial bank, what are the different types? Public, private banks, private banks, very good, foreign banks and RRBs. So from that particular area, this question has been asked with regard to foreign banks. Take care. The first statement, there is no minimum limit or let's say minimum capital requirement for wholly owned banking subsidiaries in India. Second, for wholly owned banking subsidiaries in India, at least 50% of the board members should be Indian nationals. So this question is with regard to what? The foreign banks. And we all know that there is what? A minimum capital requirement. How can we say that there is no minimum capital requirement? It doesn't make a sense, right? And now this keyword no. What are they? They are an extreme word, which gives you a hint that 95% chance is there for that particular statement with the presence of extreme word to be incorrect. So the first one is wrong. So automatically what happens? A and C is eliminated. Out of B and D, make a choice. And now we all know that if it is a wholly owned banking subsidiary, definitely 50% ownership should be of the residential people or the Indian nationals. It makes a sense. So the second one is correct. So we all know that as far as the RBI is concerned, the central bank of a country is concerned, we all know that this particular foreign banks, if at all they have to operate here, they should be what? A minimum capital requirement. Without a minimum capital requirement, they will not be able to function properly. And with regard to the second statement, we all know that, yes, it has to be what? The resident Indian nationals who should have a 50% of the subsidiary owning, or let's say the board members should be Indians. Is it clear? Now, having said that, moving on to the next question. With reference to CSR in India, consider the following statements. The first one, the CSR rules specify that expenditures that benefit the company directly or its employees will not be considered as CSR activity. Second, CSR activity do not specify what? Minimum spending on CSR. Now, out of this particular statement, which of the following ones are correct? We all know that the first one is a correct statement, whereas second one is incorrect. So what is CSR, my students? Corporate social responsibility. So now this particular topic is also based on the principle of trusteeship that's put forward by Mahatma Gandhi. And now, according to CSR, corporate social responsibility, in simple terms, I would say that the big companies, right? Now, when they keep on earning profits, of course, they pay tax, but then to make them more socially obliged or to make them a part of the social welfare activities, a rule was brought in saying that out of their total net worth, 2% should be dedicated for some social welfare activity. It could be in education, it could be in hospitals, it could be in whatever they want, but it has to be dedicated. And that came to be called as corporate social responsibility. So now, whatever expenditure the companies or the corporates are incurring with regard to corporate social responsibility, it has to benefit who? The society. And it is not going to have what? A direct benefit on the employees of the company or the company activity. That is why the first one is correct. The next question. If the USA were to default on its debt, holders of US Treasury bonds will not be able to exercise their claims to receive payment. It makes you think, right? Yeah, I know. The second one. The USA government debt is not backed. Look at the keyword, not. Again, as I told you, only, all, whole, not, etc. They are extreme keywords, right? So it said that it is not backed or supported by any hard assets, but only by the faith of government. Again, only is an extreme keyword. So from this particular question, it has a synchronization. How? You have to identify whether the first statement is having a connection to the second statement or not. One can be correct, another can be incorrect also. So as far as this particular question is correct, if you see, the first statement happens to be incorrect, whereas the second statement happens to be correct. Why? Because we all know that the US government debt, of course, it is not backed by what? Any hard assets like gold or securities or whatever, but it is the complete trust or faith of the government. So that is one reason why the second statement happens to be correct. And now in this particular question, if you see, for example, the US government debt, which may consist of your treasury bonds. Okay. Now, they do not actually have a support or a backup for those things with physical assets, maybe like your gold or silver or whatever. But the complete trust or the faith of the government matters a lot, because the whole point here is when there is a complete faith or a trust, automatically the government will be able to levy taxes and generate what? Revenue accordingly. And thus this reliance or the dependency on the faith and credibility is very, very important. And that is one of the most important thing with regard to the so-called fiat, the modern fiat currencies. What are fiat currencies? Legal tender money, right? And now, moving on to the first one. We cannot say that sometimes, or let's say, if the USA were default on debt, then the bond holders will not be able to exercise their claim. It's not the case. They can actually what? They can still have a claim for their payment. Now, this default doesn't mean that, or let's say it means, the meaning of default here is the government may be failing, or they would fail to pay what? Its or meet its payment obligations. Whereas, with regard to the claiming, by whom? By the holders, that is not the case. They will still have a claim on the same. But when the government is actually having what? When they are unable to meet its payment obligations, severe consequences. What consequences? Financial as well as economic consequences can happen. So that can even sometimes have a great impact on the credit worthiness and also thereby impacting the financial markets. So this is what you need to understand from this particular question. And now the 11th one. This is also a question which is in the format of statement 1 and statement 2 perspective. And the keyword here is what? Syndicate lending. So now the first statement tells syndicate lending spreads the risk of borrower default across multiple lenders. Second one, this loan can be a fixed or a lump sum amount or lump sum of funds, but cannot be a credit line. That is a keyword to be understood. In this particular question, if you see, the answer is option number C. Your statement 1 is correct, whereas statement 2 is incorrect. And that is only because of one single keyword, that is cannot. See, the syndicate lending, of course it can be fixed amount, but they say it cannot be a credit line. Actually, they can be a credit line as a whole. So let us quickly have a look into what is a syndicate lending in simple term. So basically, a syndicate lending, or let's say a syndicate loan, what are they? It is a it's a financing which is offered by whom? By a syndicate, which is again made up of a group of lenders. So what do? These people, they work together to provide money or to provide funds for a borrower. So here what happens? Lending becomes easier. See, the borrower is getting the money. Now, the burden of that particular loan is being shared equally among a group of lenders. So now, that is the whole idea regarding this syndicate lending. So now, in case, for example, the issue of NPA, what is that? Non-performing assets. If that is happening also, if a loan is taken via the so-called syndicate process, then that particular risk is being spread to multiple lenders, not just one single lender, right? So in that way, syndicate lending offers quite a relief to the creditors, or let's say the ones who give the money. And this syndicated loans, they are not small, they do not involve small amounts. Syndicated loans involve large or huge amounts of money. So now what happens? The risk is spread among several financial institutions. So automatically what happens? It will reduce the impact if the borrower is failing to repay. This is actually the idea behind syndicate lending. One of the hit list topic connected to this area is ECB. What is that? External commercial borrowings. You can have a look into this also for the upcoming examination. Is it clear? Now the second statement. This syndicate loans can be a fixed amount but cannot be a credit line. But if you see in reality, yes, they can be what? They can be a credit line also. Is it clear? Now, having said that, also one more thing, before that you need to know what is a credit line, students. What is a credit line? In simple terms, it's kind of limit, I would say. A credit line in fact is a limit. It will allow whom? The borrowers to draw funds. How much ever you want you can borrow, no problem. But there is a certain limit or a ceiling in which you can borrow. And that is one of the most important features of this particular syndicate lending arrangement as far as the arrangement is concerned. So credit line means in simple terms a limit. You need not have to think it is a big concept or anything. You can borrow but with certain ceiling or limit. That's it. And syndicate lending functions via that. Now the next question. Consider the following statements in respect of digital rupee. First one, a sovereign currency issued by whom? RBI, in alignment with the monetary policy. Of course, we all know, yes, digital currency, again, monetary policy is whom? The RBI, right? Yes, it is. Second, it appears as a liability on the RBI's balance sheet. So this particular question talks about the RBI's balance sheet, asset and liability side. And third one, it is insured against inflation by its very design. And third one, it is freely convertible against what? Against commercial bank money and cash. This is a very direct question. Indeed, we all know that, of course, this digital rupee put forward by RBI, no doubt about it. And yes, they are also what? A liability on RBI's balance sheet. But how can we say they are insured against inflation? Do we really think they are insured against inflation? That makes you think, right? Definitely no. They are not insured against what? The price rise or inflation by the way it is designed as a whole. That is why we are eliminating what? The third option. And now fourth one, yes, it is convertible. So now again, as I told you before, using the K-easy technique, the moment you know that the third statement is incorrect or you feel it is not matching with the comparative method using the keyword comparative method and comparing the keyword digital rupee, once you see that the third option is kind of incorrect, come to your given options. See which all options are having 3. But in this particular question, UPSC has made it very tricky. Why? Only one option has 3. Remaining every single option is without that. So you may not be able to apply the so-called keyword elimination comparison technique here. So now, but we all know that, right? The so-called first statement, 101% it is correct. So that is why we arrive at a conclusion saying that the D is the right answer. But you may ask a doubt, ma'am, sometimes KEZ is not working in certain question. That is because UPSC has become more smart. Because UPSC also knows that students tend to use every cheat codes, tricks, or let's say techniques to solve the options. So they want to test your real knowledge. That is why they have given options also like that. Having said that, back to your digital rupee. So we all know that this digital rupee called as what? Called as e-rupee, or let's say CBDC, Central Bank's digital currency. It is what? A pilot project of our country's RBI, the Central Bank of India. Now, the reason why digital rupee was brought in is only because of what? The so-called cryptocurrency, which is again introduced using a technology called as blockchain. because of that particular hit list topic only, this year if you see, this particular digital rupee question has been asked. So now we know that Bitcoin, the most popular form of cryptocurrency, since 2008 it is there, right? But in our country, India, we were not that, agreeable to have the cryptocurrency transaction. So using what? The very same technology called as blockchain, RBI came up with digital rupee called as CBDC, Central Bank Digital Currency. The only difference is that in a cryptocurrency, it is decentralized in nature, which means there is no single authority to control it. Whereas in a digital rupee or your CBDC, what happens? Basically, there is an administrator to control, and that is the RBI. That is the major difference. And now, this particular digital rupee, it is also a legal tender, like a fiat currency. The whole point is, it is not physically available to you. Rather, we do the transactions online. There are so many countries that have been using CBDC already. For example, if you see Bahamas, they were the very first country to use the CBDC. And the CBDC in their country is called as sand dollar. If you see, even Nigeria, they use a CBDC. It's called as e-Naira. Our very own neighbor China uses CBDC. It's called as ECNY. And in India we call it as digital rupee or e-rupee. Now, having said that, moving on to the next question. Why I said all these points is, for the mains examination also, using these global scenarios and points, you can make a note of it. At the same time, cryptocurrency, blockchain technology and CBDCs are the hit list topics for the upcoming 2025 prelims examination also. And the last question for the day is, with reference to fiscal capital in Indian economy, consider the following statements. So now in this particular question, you have certain category of items and then you have the matching of that as well. This question is not asking you to identify which of the options are correct. Let's say 1 or 2, 3 or 4 like that. Rather, like a previous question which we already discussed, this particular question is asking you to identify which of the following pairs are correctly matched. So now it is not 1 or 2, rather how many in total? Farmer's plow, working capital. Do you think it's working capital? It makes you think, no, it is incorrect. A farmer's plow is actually a fixed capital. So now the first one is incorrect. Second is what? Computer. Of course, we all know that computer is basically a fixed capital. It is right. So now one is correct. Second, yarn used by the weaver. What is yarn basically? How can we say it is a fixed capital? It is again something they use in the day-to-day operations, which means it is a working capital. So that again is incorrect. And now petrol. Of course, we all know it is a working capital. Now having said this, what is your answer? Option number B. Only 2 of them are correctly matched, whereas the remaining 2 are wrongly matched. So again, for example, normally if you see, there is a pattern in which UPSC asks you option 1, option 2, or let's say 2, 3, 4 like that. Over here, we have to choose the right answers and then say how many are right or how many are wrong. So this pattern of question is gaining more popularity and trend in the UPSC examination. In 2023 also, you could witness something like this. So start practicing with such kind of questions as whole. Is it clear? Now, having said that, let's quickly have a look into what is fiscal capital. So we all know that fiscal capital, what are they basically? It's very, very important, right? It plays a very crucial or an important role in the production process. Now, the usage of fiscal capital has a lot of importance in contributing to our country's GDP. In simple terms, what is fiscal capital? It is referred to as one of the 3 main factors in what? In the production process. Fiscal capital can be of 2 broad categories. One is fixed capital, another is working capital. And now in economics, if you see this fiscal capital, it is a term that is used basically to describe the tangible. What are tangible? Things that you can see and touch, right? So now this fiscal capital, it is used to describe the tangible assets which are used in the production process. And those tangible assets consist of what? Fixed capital and working capital. Now, in simple term, fixed capital refers to those assets that have been used for a very long period of time. Let's say, for example, your tools, your machinery, your buildings. All these are what? Fixed capital. And you can use them for a very long period of time. Let's say for years. Whereas working capital, they are short-term assets or short-term tools. Let's say, for example, whatever activities or whatever items that have been used by the production process on a regular basis, on a day-to-day basis, like raw materials, money, all these are used in production, right? They come under your working capital. As far as this particular question is concerned, again, this is taken from your NCERT books, class 10, chapter 2. As we discussed sectors of economy, you remember we had a question based on primary, secondary and tertiary sector. Similarly, from that particular chapter, with regard to your capital, physical capital, fixed capital, working capital is being asked. So now for the upcoming 2025 examination also, human capital or human capital formation is indeed one of the hit list topic. There are more chances for this particular question to come for examination. That is again from your NCERT, your class 9 chapter 2, which talks about people as a resource. You will think that NCERT is just for you to read something or know some concepts. No. It also has an impact with regard to examination, because UPSC wants to understand whether you guys truly know the basics in the most amazing manner, or it's just that you're by hearting it and learning only the important topics like money, banking, taxation, etc. So we have done with our PYQs of 2024, my students, with a detailed explanation. I have also told you what are the most probable or the related areas that you have to focus along with these topics. Many current affairs pertaining to the topics what we have discussed is also told to you. I hope you have made a note of the same. Now, for the upcoming examination, make sure that you are highly focused, and some of the important hit list topics, apart from what I told you while discussing these questions, are from national income. All the indicators like your GDP, your GNP, your NDP, etc. And for the coming year, the items that are included and not included in GDP could be a hit list area. As always, Human Development Index. These days, questions pertaining to certain indexes like your Gross National Happiness Index, your Human Development Index are also to be focused. Apart from that, your equality indexes like Gender Inequality Index and related topics, make sure that you focus. And also, certain related current affairs with regard to poverty like Gender Inequality Index, then Global Hunger Index, because it has been a very important topic in the news over these days. So make sure that you go through all that. And then as usual, inflation, money, banking. I will never say that you have to eliminate any topics from that, because it is unavoidable by default. Some or the other way, from anywhere of that particular chapter, questions can come. It is not only the instruments of monetary policy, it is also anything and everything they can ask you. Did we not see a question with regard to foreign banks? It is not a hit list area out of the banking chapter, but you see a question from that has also been asked. Actually, it comes under different types of scheduled commercial banks or different types of scheduled banks. Under that, your public, private, foreign banks and RRB comes. From there, they have picked up that particular topic. So don't avoid any of the topics under money and bank and inflation as well. Then financial markets give more importance, because too many questions based on your debt instruments, your money market, your capital market, your primary and secondary market is on the rise. So make sure that you focus on those areas as a whole. Don't leave it thinking it is difficult or let's say it's too tricky or it is having too much of applications. Make sure that you learn it properly and thoroughly as a whole. I hope this discussion has provided you with valuable insights as to how to analyze your PYQs. It is not just reading the questions. Rather, it is about having a clear-cut understanding as to why that particular option was wrong and a quick 360-degree coverage of those topics. So then you are learning it then and there, right? So thank you so much, my students. It was great interacting with all of you. I'll see you all soon with more amazing lectures like this at Ekam IAS Academy. Jai Hind.